American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
Was don't vote early because you'll give Democrats a heads up of what they have to do to get more voters out there, or ballot harvesting, or whatever clandestine moves that they have. So I'm not really sure. Is it vote early or vote on the election day itself?
Yeah, we don't have there isn't much consistent messaging on that. I think sort of the establishment people, and not that Bernie Moreno came, he's kind of an outsider getting himself into the party, but he was out there at Trumptober Fest talking about encouraging everybody to vote early and get 10 friends to vote early, and he's talking exactly what you were mentioning. They have limited resources, right? So as the election comes, we're all going to start getting texts. Hey, are you voting for Bernie Moreno? Make sure you get out there and vote. Blah da 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 da. When you request an absentee, if you request an absentee ballot, or if you vote early, the party systems recognize that, and they take you off the list. And when you go off the list of the people they have to email or send a text to, or a robocall, or whatever it is, you being off the list means somebody else at the bottom can get on the list. That's one more person theoretically that they can contact. That's the argument in favor, and that's why the party apparatus and the candidates almost always invariably are telling people to get out there and quote unquote bank your vote. We've heard, Jonathan's a panelist on the show. Jonathan Broadbent is not in favor of it because he thinks it does give information out, because it does get logged, and bad actors can understand where are the early votes coming from. And I believe it might actually even be like what party, if they have a party registration, if they have a party ID, they know what that is. That, in theory, tells them this is how many votes we need to manufacture in whatever nefarious way, whether it's blank ballots filled out with only whoever it is, the Democrat, one single vote for the Democrat presidential candidate, or in this case, maybe it would be Sherrod Brown votes. Is it acting in the computers behind the scenes? I have less knowledge about that. I can understand why vote early. There are a lot of allegations, a lot of discussions about the things that are happening in the nooks and crannies and other ways to quote unquote cheat the elections. For me, I just think I feel good about voting on election day. It's annoying to get those texts all the time, but I wish I could tell them, yeah, I'll be there. I always say, if you're going to vote and you're, neither rain nor sleet nor hail is going to stop you, then, go ahead and vote on election day. I have a very easy ballot the polling location. I'm in and out in 5 minutes, really. Not everybody's like that. And if you've got somebody who they're going to vote for Trump, but they're kind of just like, oh yeah, I guess I'm voting for Trump, but they're not, you don't know 100% that they're going to, even remember to vote, make a plan, know exactly when they're going to go, or if it's raining, or if they're under the weather, they're not going to go. That's the person that I think you want to make sure that you want to communicate, get it in there, go to the Board of Elections or mail it in. It really, it's not, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, since I'm a poll worker, I've always voted early because I'm a poll worker, and I don't want to vote at that time because I'm focusing on the job as a poll worker. So I tend to vote early, but it's confusing for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I
appreciate your explanation.
I mentioned to Jonathan, it would be nice maybe if we could get something on here, and it's almost already started. Maybe it might be too late, but a good healthy debate. Somebody on the bank your vote side, and somebody on election day side, and really go at it. I kind of gave you the broad strokes, and help people decide. I think Republicans generally like voting on election day in person at their polling location. Bernie made an interesting declaration out there today, and I think he said that if when we're watching the election results, and they'll be right here on Ohio Political News, get yourself 2 screens. You can put on whatever it is, national coverage on your main screen, and off on the side on your laptop or on your phone, watch Ohio Political News. We'll be covering it locally. But when the polls close, the first thing that comes out is the early vote, and they all just sort of get dumped. And what he said was, if Sherrod Brown doesn't have at least 55% of the vote, that's basically going to mean all the big networks are going to call it for Bernie Moreno. And if Moreno wins, it's basically means that the Republicans control the Senate. So that was a very interesting part of his speech. Is that a big ask? 55%, I don't know. Democrats definitely vote early, but I've been seeing, data coming in from Virginia, because Virginia has been early voting, I think 2 weeks already. And the Republicans are way ahead. I don't know if in raw numbers, but they're way ahead of where they've been in the past. So that messaging is getting out, and it's, Virginia is kind of it's a stretch goal for somebody like Donald Trump to win, but they're encouraging numbers out of Virginia right now in terms of how the Republicans are doing in early voting.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. All right, so we're going to listen. We got Marcell Strbich as well. Marcell, it's good to see you. Listen, we're going to put you on hold here for just a minute. We're going to slide back in and talk about all this voter integrity and stuff. But I did want to play a couple things that were happening first out there at the Trumptober Fest, which I had a great time out there. It's the best time I've had without any beer in a long time. It was a lot of fun. So I want to play a little bit of this, and we do have that Bernie Moreno. I did slice that out too. I mean, we were out there for a couple hours live streaming, and I thought it went pretty well. I was pleasantly surprised. But anyhow, let's just catch a little bit of this, and then we'll bring it back around to the election integrity.
If Trump doesn't win this election, you can kiss the United States goodbye.
Kiss your ass goodbye, right?
That too. I was trying to be nice, which anybody that sees this and knows me will think
we had a lot of fun
funny.
out there, really did.
But
is that Biden over there?
Hey,
is that Biden on that stool? Kent, is that Biden? You think there's going to be any cheating this election?
better stop it, man. Well, you got to ask a question that really deserves an answer.
I think I'm going to go talk to Joe Biden and see if he has anything to say over there.
He might fall off the bar stool.
Yeah, let's go talk to Joe Biden. Oh, thank you. You too. That's Joe Biden over there in the bar stool. We got to talk Joe Biden over here. He had a lot of guts showing up. Hey, Joe. How you doing? Doesn't have much to say at the moment. Somebody said this was Joe Biden, so I wanted to come over here to find out. Is that right? No? Kind of looks like him. I was just wondering. That's all. Although I don't know if he'd be welcome here. I don't know. Well, wait. It's a lot of phoniness with her, though.
Oh, it's too phony. It's way too phony. And she doesn't. Sadly, you have sheep.
Yeah.
And the sheep don't understand that eventually the wolves are going to come. And without people like all of us, who's going to defend their silly asses,
right.
You know?
Right. And as I tell everybody, vote as often as you can, because that's what they do.
Right. If you reject.
Were you at the Butler event?
He was there.
All right, come here. Let's see how did you enjoy that? What happened?
About 15 minutes of fun and running out of the place.
You were at the original Butler or this last one?
No, the one in July. My wife and I were there.
Okay, so were you near the stage?
So
yeah,
Trump's
Joe did
here.
not buy me a beer. Nope.
All the news people are, at like 6 o'clock compared to him. We were right behind the news people to the right.
So you were pretty close, yeah. So that guy was at the original rally where Trump got shot the Butler one. What did you think when you saw it?
First couple shots, from what I remember going off, we hit the ground, kind of ducked down, and heard the rest of them go off, and turned around, grabbed my wife's hand, and ran out of there.
Oh, yeah, you left right then and there, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let me tell you this, abortion. I'm a retired nursing professor and worked in OB-GYN for a while. And when you talk to a Democrat, the two most important issues to them are legal.
Gotta admit, so we talked to this lady here for a while, Brian, and she knew everything. Gosh, she just knew everything. It was amazing. This is just a
abortion, and to me, I have witnessed what an abortion is. And they actually go in and dismember the baby. They manually pull the baby apart and then suck it out with a vacuum. And I think anybody that wants to vote for abortion needs to be a witness in an OR suite when it's happening, and then tell me you want to make that legal. And what I even say is, an amoeba in a pond is a living thing.
Why was the one SWAT and his wife the first ones on the roof? What really happened? Where'd the shots come from? I was sitting in the back, the day of the 13th.
Were you behind Trump?
I was behind Trump on the first rally, yeah.
How high or where?
I was right here.
That's you?
That's me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my cousin made me this shirt. That's great.
So that's where you were. Look how close that guy was on the day that Trump got shot. He's right there, like the first row. Unbelievable. So you were like, wow, bird's eye view, I guess.
Did you think though? I'm questioning whether it was just a single shooter. I'm not sure.
I think there was
multiple shooters.
Yeah, there's a lot of. That narrative was crushed in 24 hours, I'd say. Just with some independent journalists. Why you had the crowd yelling that there was someone on the roof. I mean, the security yesterday was 10 times what it was. Is
that right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And how about the crowd? They said
the crowd was incredible.
100,000, I heard. Is that right?
It's hard to. I was in the back bleachers yesterday too, so it was hard to. That's all you could see was people.
Both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
You're having a big event if these two guys show up. And I'm not talking about Brian and me.
Was that this would be an engaged electorate, that people would be engaged in their government, because this is a self-government. What does that mean? It's all of us are the government. So we anticipate and hope that everybody will be engaged in that process.
Hi, Bernie. Hey, we're doing a live podcast. Do you have a minute?
Sure, of course. Let's do it.
Good to see you.
How's your world?
Okay. Going fine. Well, hang on a minute. Everything okay? All right, so it's just live. We've been hoping to catch you, man.
Brian Mass.
Brian.
Yeah, so anyhow, what do you think of all this?
It's great, and it's Americana.
Yeah, that's
what it is, right? It's a community coming together, celebrating life and liberty and freedom. People who want just a government that works for them, that's in the background, lets them live a good life. You enjoy here, family, which is what it's all about. The building blocks of every society is a strong family, and that's what these events promote.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been talking about that a lot, man. Strong family.
When you destroy families, babies, and morality, the society collapses.
Look, you see a mom there, a dad hanging out, enjoying good music, good food, good camaraderie. This is what they want to take away from us. They want us to all be dependent on the government, live in some big city, drive a scooter to work, on our electric car, go, no gas stoves. These are the people who want to ban everything that we like in life. We're not going to let them do that.
No. They would shut something like this down in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, they did it during COVID, right? During COVID, they wouldn't let us do something like this because they want to control our lives. Look, it's very simple. We want to control our own destiny, our own lives. That's what it's all about.
When you get in there, what's the one issue that you can stop immediately?
We got to secure the border. Look, I came here legally. My family did. We got to respect our laws. And if the first act that you have coming into this country is breaking our laws, you can't be here. So if you're in this country illegally, we're going to deport you. My opponent wants to give you citizenship. He wants to keep the borders open. We're going to close them. Look, we want immigrants to come to America, all of us. Obviously, I was a first-generation immigrant. I'm sure for you guys, third, second, fourth, fifth, or whatever. But they got to come here the right way. They got to learn English. They got to assimilate to our culture. They can't come here to take benefits. They got to understand that they're going to be additive to our economy and not lower wages. This is, by the way, not a unique proposition. This is what every country on earth requires of people to come.
The other thing I'm concerned about is the illegals actually voting. We're trying to get our states to, before someone is enrolled in the election cycle, registered to vote, they should prove that they're a citizen.
Yeah. So now it's a checkbox, as you know. It's an honor system. Right. The federal government refuses to pass the SAVE Act, which would mean that you'd have to prove citizenship to vote. That's common sense. By the way, there's no country on earth that would put up with foreign nationals coming in and voting in their elections. It's an idea that would even crush your mind. Imagine you're on vacation in some foreign country. The idea that you could vote in their elections is insane. And we need to make it harder to cheat, easier to vote. This is something we will get done. The other side wants to get rid of voter ID, let alone pass the SAVE Act. My opponent the other day, Sherrod Brown, said he would nuke the filibuster to pass a bill that would eliminate voter ID and would send everybody a ballot, even if you applied for it or not.
Voter ID.
That would be setting up a world in which voter fraud was rampant. That's what they want. We're not going to let them do that.
We're also concerned about this inflation that is just tearing everybody down.
Worse. Look, I just grabbed the sandwich and sheets on the way here. Half a sub. That's all I got. $5. I mean, that's crazy. And why do we have inflation? Because the government spending. They put a down payment on the Green New Deal. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act. They've raised government spending to the point where they want us all working for the government. We got to absolutely crush down government spending. We got to unleash American energy. We got to unleash productivity. Look, we don't know. We don't have to know whether it will get done. It got done when President Trump was in the White House. Right. We had low inflation, low interest rates. You could afford a home. You could afford a car. You could afford to raise a family. Now they're taking that all away from us.
Would you agree with this statement? I'm concerned that the growth of the public sector is getting so large, the private sector is not going to be able to afford the services.
Sure, they're crowding us out. You saw it in the last jobs report, which, by the way, I'm sure is fake. They revised 8 of the 9 last job reports. So this is some sort of election jobs report. But if you dig into even that report, government grew dramatically. We lost manufacturing jobs. Look, in Ohio, since my opponent has been in Washington, D.C., we've lost over 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And here's the worst part. He wants us to pay off the college debt of people who went and studied gender studies and women's studies, all these useless degrees. He wants us to pay off their degrees, off their debt. You know what? I had many technicians that worked for me, and the technicians take out a lot of debt to buy their own tools. We spend a fortune to train them at our expense, but they want to own their own tools. Nobody's talking about paying off technician tools, debt, right? Why are we paying off debt of useless degrees? And by the way, the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional, and yet my opponent says, no, let's spend billions of dollars on that. Totally ridiculous.
We also see some advertising that I think is not appropriate for you and not true, and that's regarding the abortion issue. Could you settle this once and for all?
We're not going to ban abortion in this country. We've made that clear, but we are going to work to reduce abortions by having adoption be easier to have, raising kids less expensive, making sure women have equal access to contraception, that we fund pregnancy centers. Look, my opponent is such a radical on this issue. He's not pro-choice. He's pro-abortion. He voted against a bill that said in a late-term abortion, you're talking about 35, 36 weeks, the baby's born, it isn't killed during the abortion, that the doctor's not allowed to give that baby life-saving care. Think about that. He voted against that. The baby's to die in a cold metal table. That's not pro-choice. That's pro-abortion. That's pro-radical.
That's just plain evil.
That's evil.
Yeah, and that's evil as it gets.
And that's who he is. Look, the Democrats have gone very far with that. So thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Bernie, thank you for the time. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right. That was excellent, huh, guys? I mean, really appreciated Bernie taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, he was really transparent, and he didn't hesitate at all on his answers to the questions.
No, he didn't. So that was good. So we had a lot of fun out there. We had to play some of that. Marcell, how are you tonight? It's good to see you.
Good. Yeah, what an engaging interview you had there. He does. He cuts right to the point. Looks you straight in the face. That's an oddity these days with a lot of these public officials.
Yeah, it was right within a politician, exactly. Okay, so let's talk tonight because you're kind of the voter integrity expert. Let's swing it in that direction. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do because early voting is starting in a couple of days, but can you give us a rundown? Where are we with this whole voter integrity for this election, do you think?
There's definitely a lot that still needs to be done. I mean, we were challenging, or records have been getting challenged across the state that are invalid or that are questionable all the way up until yesterday, which the window is now stopped for that. But now what happens is any records that were brought forward lawfully to be reviewed, and the Board of Elections took a pass, didn't follow their lawful duties in one way or the other. Now, if any of those happen to vote or there happens to be any issue with them, it just adds to the degree of legality, and we can certainly raise that up. So, that's just one aspect of it. And again, this isn't about challenging eligible qualified electors. That's what this is about. This is about addressing the sanctity of the vote and ensuring that only fully qualified eligible electors are going to go forward. So that aspect's kind of already shifted into gear. There's a lawsuit that was filed with the Ohio Supreme Court this last week. I happened to be a poll worker training for the first time on September 25th. And my understanding, our Secretary of State put out a solid directive in June that told the Board of Elections, you will train to identify both acceptable and unacceptable forms of identity to include non-citizens. Because now our law in April of 23 says that every license, every state ID, front or back, should have some form of annotation to show you if you're a citizen or non-citizen. It sounds good. Well, here's the thing. We've had 3 elections and there's been no instruction or program up to this point. So it's the Secretary of State goes out, puts that directive. You would think every single poll worker like myself was going to get that training. Well, it didn't happen for me. And when I asked the question to the facilitator of the training in Montgomery County, here in the Dayton area, the answer I got was that the material was not available and that there was already a process of verification on that type of thing in the beginning. Well, unbeknownst to that facilitator, there isn't an upfront verification or validation of non-citizens. In fact, the Secretary of State asked for the data after he did his non-citizen annual audit, realized that there are non-citizens, and realized there is an issue with proof of citizenship on the upfront side, and then proceeded to ask the Department of Homeland Security about 4 or 5 months before our election if they can get access to that database and others, and essentially was stiff-armed. So that doesn't really serve us well. So the only mechanism is to now ensure that the poll workers are trained. So this case really is intended to set clear legal precedents that the elections boards have to comply with the requirements of election training. And this is an issue that's been predominant across different counties. But we should get an answer from the Supreme Court of Ohio. They've taken the case. There'll be a couple response periods on Monday and Tuesday. Then we're going to find out. And if they rule in our favor, that means every voting location manager and all 1,600 poll workers in Montgomery County are going to have to get that training and emphasize that.
All right, let me bring Matt. Let me bring you on here to talk a little bit with Marcell, because I know that you have a lot of expertise in this as well. So, what do you think of what Marcell is saying, and maybe you can encapsulize it a little bit for people that are not as familiar with what's going on? Okay.
Well, there's a couple things. I mean, yeah, one, I read the lawsuit, and it makes a pretty strong case. The Secretary of State LaRose's directives explain, exactly what all the training is supposed to entail, and it's part of it says, I'm going to read right from it. In how to ensure the training must include how to ensure that only legally permissible forms of photo ID are accepted, and that precinct election officials are trained on unacceptable forms of photo ID, including photo IDs issued to non-citizens. So my understanding is that semi-recently the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles has changed. There's going to be there's a designation on a driver's license if you are not a citizen. Now, it doesn't come right out and say non-citizen. It says something about non-transferable, non-renewable, or something like that. But that's the indication. But it's just a little sort of like a stamp from what I've seen on the ID. Now, if you go and present such an ID, I mean, there's a reason this directive has come forward. If you present a photo ID that says basically essentially says you're not a citizen, the poll workers, and Brian's talked about it, and maybe Brian, I don't know if you have to go through training every year about when you're going to become a poll worker. And I just want to make sure, because I don't know everything. The directive says precinct election officials. Is that, Marcell, is that what we
so regardless of
call a poll worker?
Right,
generally?
it is. Regardless of whether you have previous training or not, this is a new requirement. And as a result, people need to go and get that and be trained to that. That just doesn't include the poll worker. It's a voting location manager, because that's the front line of defense. So what should happen, or the remedy should be the following. Since Montgomery County's probably already trained dozens, if not hundreds of people without this, they're going to need to come back if the court rules, favorably in this regard for the complaint, in this case me, on behalf of our county, that they have to train their voting location managers. Those voting location managers should be signing off with poll workers, even in the early voting period, let's say from October 8th all the way to November 4th, whatever that period is, that they have given them that training and showed them, an infographic on what to look for. And that should follow suit as well on election day. Each and every voting location manager, before the polls open, if we're going to do this the most accessible way, considering how many people have already gone through, the voting location manager should take some time before the oath is taken by election workers to inform them and provide them, once again, a one-page information sheet and to familiarize them with what to look for. And then if they find it, then they should be aware of what to do. And that should be a provisional ballot. And in many instances, the voting location manager takes someone to the side. They have to sign an attestation under falsification. And then they have to cure their ballot if they want it to count. So that's the nature of not denying a vote, but it's also not diluting a vote. And again, I hasten to say, if we didn't initiate this, and I don't know if they've already made these changes, they could have changed it in the last day. I was asked a question. I did an interview just today with CBS local affiliate here. And the question was, if the director in this instance decides, that they're going to change this, will you pull the lawsuit back? And I said, there are a number of instances that are not being addressed in directives within this county from the Secretary of State, whether it's cleaning data entry errors on voter records that wasn't properly done in this county, which is evidenced after a 3-month period, or it's this latest state. And the answer is no, I want it to run its course. And every county out there should see that the Supreme Court has weighed in on this, and the director should know. And this is the idea of us, as citizens, brought up at that event you were at, Joe. You've got to hold the government accountable, and we're fortunate we're working with solid legal counsel, represented by Kurt Hartman, who's running District 26 down in Hamilton. He's taken these cases on for private citizens for many years.
Okay, a couple questions, just so I don't get lost in all of this either. With the what Matt was just referring to with the ID now saying that you are not a citizen, is that something they're implementing for November or not? No? Oh, wait a second, Marcell. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Go ahead. I had you muted. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's why the Secretary of State put out a directive in June. It was intended to be executed for this election. It was called a Readiness and Preparedness Directive for November election. And so the fact that we've gotten to this point, practically right at early voting, and this hasn't been done, it's completely unacceptable.
Okay, so that probably is not going to be happening for November, right?
No, it will. It will.
Oh, it will.
Absolutely. If the Supreme Court, because this was sent forward as a lawsuit in an expedited manner, so the Supreme Court is going to render a ruling on this one way or the other within about a week and a half. And if they say, we agree, Montgomery County, you should have executed this lawful order from the Secretary of State, then it's going to be on Montgomery County Board of Elections to figure out how they're going to do that. And we're happy to give them a remedy. We think that there's a reasonable remedy to do all of this as long as the voting location managers get that training. And then if they process that type of training on the day and the spot of for every single voting location manager at every polling location, this is completely doable. And so, yeah, I think.
Okay, so I got a second question for you then. This would be for November. Now, my other question is all of the early voting. You don't show an ID when you do early voting. That's where all the cheating is taking place. All this cheating, most of it at least, is taking place with these absentee ballots, but there's nothing in there about showing a driver's license. Therefore, if the driver's license has something written on it that says not a citizen, I mean, that's a moot point for all this early voting. Would you agree with that or what?
Yes, you're making a valid point, right? There is not a copy of a photo ID requirement for absentee ballots, unlike every other photo identification requirement to vote in person. So there's an unequal application of the law that came in with the legislation HB 458, a couple of years back. We should work to remedy that. Right now, the answer from the official authorities on that is, well, we'll match a signature and we'll match whatever information was provided at the registration application. Well, I think I was on your show about a month and a half or a month ago or so, and we talked about Black Fork canvassers. Those canvassers that worked for this for-profit, they submitted false registration applications. And as a result of that, if that's allowed to run its course, if they were to have gone forward and done an absentee ballot request, having fulfilled the same information they put on the registration application, as long as it matched, it would be considered valid, even though that first set of information was false or invalid in some way. So our system is designed to validate off of matching information, not off of determining if the information in the first place was correct. And when you don't use a photo ID requirement for absentee ballots, then yes, your greatest susceptibility is going to be voter registration and or absentee ballot fraud. Now, that's something that, is going to have to be addressed, and I think there's going to be some opportunities legislatively to do that.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
So you had argued, and there were for quite some time that Secretary of State LaRose should take those, a subset at least of those mismatched records, people who had submitted registration information and it didn't match up with government databases like Social Security or the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and so they get floated in this sort of you'll have to remind me of the status that they get. It's like sort
provisional.
Well, they're not provisional, and you wanted to make them provisional, right?
Yeah, that's right. And thanks for bringing it up, because that's still a valid issue, right? So we treat any status voter record in Ohio as co-equal. And that's preposterous, right? If you think about it, if I had fully submitted all my information, right, gave you everything I had and it was checked, valid, good to go, and somebody just wrote none, right, none, just to make a voter record created, they'll have equal status and access to an absentee ballot as I do. So we have created, again, unequal application and access to a ballot. Why? For the sake of convenience and accessibility, if you ask me. So what we asked our Secretary of State to do, because there is some provisions in law that if a ballot comes back undeliverable, or a registration application comes back undeliverable, they go into provisional. Provisional is this status that requires a person who would be casting a ballot to have to resolve, or what we call cure, their information before that ballot counts. And so we said, well, if you're using it for that, why wouldn't you use it for mismatched data, right? Because we have about 250 to 350,000 records out there. Many of them are duplicates. Many of them are wrong Social Security numbers. Anybody could have put any number on there. It could have been stolen information. It just could have been a goof on somebody's part. But the way that Secretary of State LaRose's rule set works in his election official manual, he instructs the Board of Elections in those instances where a confirmation notice has not been resolved yet to grant them fully qualified eligible elector status to sign a petition and to get an absentee ballot. So we think that's a self-error, and that needs to change. It's a civil rights issue, it's a constitutionality issue, and it really starts a dilution of the vote. Now, we asked the Secretary of State to do that, and I think his legal counsel advised him not to and told him that the legislature has to explicitly tell them to do that. We pressed upon that and said, well, how can you do all these other things, whether it's, cooperating with the Department of Homeland Security to grant access to the election systems and networks, or it's taking, third-party money for the 2020 election. and not ask the legislature. And then somehow for this, you have to get explicit reasoning. And I think what we've come to learn is there is an aspect of lawfare that I think that office thinks of first before they do anything. And it doesn't matter, I think, in their sense, if it has merit, which I think they understand it has merit, but they want an additional layer of assurance that their legislature could pass a bill for them, and then they feel like they can now defend it better in court.
Can I ask you a question, Marcell? It's kind of along the same lines here as what you were just mentioning just now, but came to my mind. I know that I was listening to the Bob France show. Bob France repeatedly was asking LaRose if he was going to talk to Dave Yost and make sure that he could put these registration people into provisional ballot status or not. And Bob France 3 times said, "Are you going to do it?" And 3 times Frank LaRose said yes, he would do it. Did Frank do that? Do you know?
No, to our knowledge, that's not been done formally. We checked the website. We understand from other conversations that occurred. It's something that they're discussing still, but why make that assertion, right? Why declare it? One thing could have been said, it will depend on what the workload is of the Attorney General. So sure, the Attorney General has a lot of cases. Now this could be a elaborate formal legal opinion. It could be less of a formal legal opinion. He did not go forward on it from the perspective of what he told Ohioans, from what I heard, yet. Of course, we've gotten to a point where early voting has begun. So I can't describe to you one way or the other the motive or the intent there, but that window existed for quite some time. It's interesting, that interview took place on September 16th. So what stops, let's say, that office from putting forward a formal legal request and then saying, look, we did our part. We told Ohioans we're going to do this and see if the Attorney General can give us some clarity as to whether we have any prohibitions or restrictions on that. And then leave it to the Attorney General. But it's almost like that conversation took place, of course, not with our awareness, and it was just decided don't do it. So, look, this doesn't engender a great degree of confidence one way or the other in terms of we could have done some more things to get to whether there's truly a prohibition there. But
but you hadn't heard anything from Yost, and we haven't heard anything from LaRose official on it, which is, and I can't believe it was September 16th. I mean, I thought it was just like yesterday. The time is just moving so fast. It's kind of frightening. Brian, do you got anything for Marcell?
Yeah, I will go through my poll worker training this week, and I will definitely ask the question about your new identifications and the citizenship issue. I'm going to ask that question directly, and next week I'll be able to tell you what they told me.
Well, if you want to make more enemies, Brian, in Lake County, you could keep your mouth shut, and if they don't mention it, file yourself a lawsuit in Lake County. So Marcell's the suit is specific to Montgomery.
It's Wood County. It's Miami County. There's some deficiencies that I'm hearing about in Franklin County. So this is what happens. The Secretary of State tells the BOEs to do something, and a handful of them don't do it. So what would you do as an executive? If your Board of Elections is blowing you off, what choices do you have? Make an example of somebody so that the rest of them know they can't blow you off.
Well, I saw the directive.
I don't understand why.
He gave him I think in the directive, and the Board of Elections might consider it chump change, but he said, okay, and I'm going to give $1 million to the boards of elections, and I think it was a total, so they're probably like, oh, thanks a lot, but that, you and me and everybody watching the show, you think of about $1 million as a pretty hefty chunk of change. In the world of government, that's just a drop in the bucket, but he provided $1 million to the boards of elections to do this training and to do it right, and if they're not doing it, then somebody needs to hold them accountable, and I'm glad you've put this out there. I wanted to make another comment because we had, I think it was 27, I'm just checking my phone here, at least 27 House reps who signed a letter saying hey, look, we know it's not necessarily in black and white letter of the law that you have the power to do this, but we're going to stand up here and encourage you and say, please go ahead and make those mismatches provisional only status, because that will provide a more secure election. You can go, and I don't know if there's a list of them anywhere available. I'm finding it at Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom's Telegram. There are 27, and so let's say this. I'm going to go ahead and say it. There are 27 representatives who signed that letter. Maybe some have a plausible deniability as to why they didn't go ahead and sign it. There are 67 members of the Ohio House. They're all begging and asking us right now to vote no on issue 1 to preserve the supermajority that they have in the State House. If we succeed, and they're doing their darndest to defeat issue 1, if we do succeed as constituents, I think we're going to want some compensation for our loyalty to the Republican Party in keeping them in those positions. And we're going to ask them first thing when the new general assembly gets inaugurated next January. The first thing we want is something like HB 472 or even more robust protections for our elections going forward, because this sort of pussyfooting around and, namby-pamby style legislating we're not going to put up with it anymore. We're done having to beg the Secretary of State to do something that he should be doing anyway. Let's get some laws on the books and get some real election laws in Ohio.
Marcell, if LaRose just puts those into provisional status, like he should, and then they come, if it's not legally correct, what's really going to happen? I mean, what are they going to do? Slap him on the wrist, probably, right? What would really happen to him if he did that without permission?
Here's the thing. We started a letter in August, got 50 different statewide advocacy organizations. That's why you have entities like Ohio Associates for Medical Freedom, Cleveland Right to Life. We realized that we have to speak with a louder voice across a number of groups. And that was effective, because within a week of having submitted that letter, to Secretary of State's office, he went and sent his own letter to the Senate President and the Speaker and said, I've looked at our situation. I want to work with you on potential election legislation. Not next year, Matt. He said in the lame duck session. So they're coming back probably right after election, let's say November. And there's 3 areas that he wants to work on now. He wants to do proof of citizenship up front. Hey, that's great. We had that in HB 472, but that's fine. Happy that he's coming on to that idea. He doesn't want to have to deal with all of this that's coming with this issue. It's happening in all the states. Arizona and New Hampshire just passed their own laws on proof of citizenship. The second thing he wants to do is he wants to eliminate drop boxes. Okay, I don't understand why they were all supportive of that in the first place, but he's using the basis of a 10th District Court federal ruling, which just undercut who can deliver that, which effectively opens up a loophole on ballot harvesting when it's no longer a family or a relative member and a person can choose anybody. So he's using that as the basis for now being willing to go on that. Again, fully supports Secretary of State if he's going there and the legislature's going there. And the third one, which he said on Bob France's interview, is that he wants to adopt provisional ballot marking and expand that as a requirement for mismatched data records. Again, that's perfectly great with us. With that said, if you were to do that today, just look at the chain of events. And Mark Elias or whomever in ACLU, whatever, they sue him, right? One way or the other. If his legislature passes a bill in a month or two, the legal cases take months to drag out, right? He passes that bill, and let's say January, this bill is on the governor's desk as part of the budget bill, right? Which is not uncommon for them to load things up. Both parties load things up in that omnibus budget. If that happens, what's going to happen to that lawsuit? Once he already has a law in the books that effectively says, again, we have a supermajority. They're not acting like it's a supermajority. So what is going to happen is the judge is going to look at that and say it's already law. I mean, I don't know where else the lawsuit goes from there because it's already been codified and it's been protected. If I could come up with that 101 analysis in my mind, not saying good, bad, or different, I don't see how they couldn't see it either. I just think this is a case of cherry picking what works politically and from a messaging and a PR standpoint right now, and whatever other political considerations. So they're going to go with it in that manner, and I guess the battle space is now the lame duck.
No, I like what you're saying there, and that was kind of the point I was trying to get across too. It's like, just do it, just do it. Quit playing games. Quit be, they're going to push a lawsuit against me. Democrats do this kind of crazy stuff all the time. Okay, they wait for the lawsuit. The lawsuits can drag out, like you said. It's going to become law eventually. Let's just tidy up this election because it's the most important election in our lifetime. Hey, this is a little bit older data. I think this was accumulated from Allison Nikolai. But anyhow, this is some of the stuff you're referring to, isn't it? Look at some of these numbers. So it's not just, one person here or one person there. We have some problems with these databases. Undeliverable addresses, 132,000. Blank apartment lot and hotel lot, and just not putting like a suite number on it or anything like that, 78,000. Out-of-state movers, that seems awfully high, 179,000. But again, this is just, to me, it's very untidy, or it's a good word. It's just chaotic, right? These registration voter rolls need to be cleaned up, and they should be pristine in when you look at them. You shouldn't be able to find anything wrong with them. Okay, so we're finding hundreds of thousands of little errors here and there, and when you don't put an apartment number on a registration, those could just build up at the front desk, and then it's ripe for ballot harvesting. Somebody can come along and just grab them all. I mean, there's so many things going on here, right?
Right. You showed a chart. That's all Secretary of State data. That's what integrates into that Check My Ohio Vote, Ohio Check My Vote website. And so what you don't see on there is just how many duplicate registrations we have. It's unreal. 14 days prior to the election, all of those are supposed to be resolved, according to the Secretary of State. They're supposed to be 0%. In fact, on any given month, each county should only have 0.03% duplicate registrations. You want to take a guess how many duplicate registrations are in the system that we turned over last Friday to the Secretary of State's office? Up to 24,000. This is all official data. The state should have, based on the size of the amount of voter records, about 8 million. They should only have about 2,800 total to qualify for that. Here's my question. Okay, so now voter registration stops this week, right? Are they going to be able to clean up 24,000 duplicate registrations to get it down to the Secretary of State's requirement in the next 2 weeks? My answer is, I put a lot of money that they're not going to clean that up. And so this is another example of, we set rules, the Secretary of State knows these things, and the BOEs are blowing them off. What are you going to do about that? That's now the new conversation we're having. How many more violations of the Secretary of State's directives are going to exist? And how are we supposed to have confidence in election administration if they're not going to do it? And that's the part where it's going to be very interesting, because as you see, we've gone down this path now, and now we'll just have to see where this goes from here. But we're tracking it. The Secretary of State's tracking it. It's a question of when are the Board of Elections going to do these things?
Yeah, I think that the problem here is this election, as we keep saying, is just so important. We can't allow any cheating or anything with this election. My gosh, think about it. We got to get Bernie Moreno across the finish line so that we can have the majority in the Senate. Okay, we've got to get another. Even if Trump were to win, that's not an indication that there isn't some kind of hampering or cheating going on in Ohio. We've got to make sure we get somebody like Orlando Salz, I think his name is, or
Sanza.
Sanza. We need to get another congressman across the finish line. Derek Merens, somebody, because we need those extra congressional seats, so that if Trump gets in, he's got a majority in the Senate, he's got a majority in Congress, and he can get things done. So this is so important, what's happening in Ohio. It's not just, oh, well, Trump wins, so that proves that there's no cheating. Give me a break with that.
Yeah, that's my concern about the talk about lame duck, Marcell, is, if you kick the can down the road, and even if it's in lame duck, which is for everybody, sort of new to Ohio politics, that's where at the end of most House members' terms and half the senators' terms in the Ohio State House, they will do a absolute flurry of legislation before they're either done, out of office, or they're termed out, or whatever. This is going to come in December. So when they say, okay, well, maybe in lame duck we're going to, pass these election laws, there are two problems I see. One is, if Trump wins, there will not be as much urgency. People, oh, well, we won the election, Trump won, and maybe Bernie Moreno does get across the finish line. Well, that doesn't, and if it's not front and center in their minds, and it doesn't feel like imperative that we fix the elections, even though regardless of what happens in November, the system needs fixed, and you've illustrated that time and time again here and on other platforms. So if Trump wins, they may not have the urgency. And if Trump loses, then it's going to seem like sour grapes, and some of them are not going to want to be seen as trying to, fix the election or rig the elections. Oh, well, we lost and we're sore losers, and so now we're going to try to suppress the vote. That's going to be the narrative, and they're going to be afraid of that narrative if that's the outcome. So that's what worries me about lame duck in the coming election. I wondered, and I don't know if you want to comment on that, and there was a thing that I saw you had written on Twitter about, you had written to Mark Bukita, already confirming absentee ballot requests made for non-validated voter records in the system. And I know this is sort of on, we've had Allison Nikolai on, Joe mentioned earlier. Can you speak to that? So are you saying that, and I think there's a team of people, and you can elaborate on that, people are constantly watching who is requesting, A, the voter rolls, and B, who's requesting. And are you saying that they are seeing some of these people who should be in provisional status going out there and requesting absentee ballots, and whether it's the person or somebody on behalf of that person, knowing that they're not actually at that address, but I can ask for a ballot to be sent to that address, and then do something, basically commit a felony? I mean, we got to reiterate, every single instance of this, it should be a felony, but the problem is it's very hard to prosecute. You want to talk about that? Talk to that a little bit, Marcell?
Yeah, no, I do. And look, when we brought lawful voter record challenges, it's not like we picked a bunch of random and said, how do we harass these records? We said, let's find the situation was with people who did this. I wasn't personally involved in submitting formal challenges, but I've talked to people throughout the state. The way this worked with these different groups is these were private citizens under law in Ohio, and they found authoritative.gov data. And it showed that these people had moved to another state and already voted. And that's clear letter law in Ohio, that if you've left the state and you voted, you've just given up your eligibility to stay in Ohio. You can't vote in another state and stay on Ohio's voter rolls. We bring this information, to these county board of elections. In a number of cases, they didn't give us a hearing within 10 days, so they broke that aspect of the law. They didn't necessarily, in all instances, properly notify all parties. There was just confusion because they were all led to kind of figure this out on their own, until I think a level of legal organization then just became about blanket denials. No matter how compelling the evidence was, it was like, oh, just tell them that we can't do it because of NVRA bulk submission, or tell them that that's evidence that's not inadmissible because the date of birth didn't come from a .gov website. All of these technicalities became reasons for it. So what they have done by choosing to that outcome is each and every one of these cases was brought to them lawfully as a challenge, and these people went and they filled out a statement under falsification. So they put themselves on the line. And they had to properly investigate this. The Board of Elections should have properly investigated each and every one by the law. It didn't happen. And so what we saw are instances of ballot requests. Nobody's really voted yet, right? Unless you're overseas right now. But ballot requests for absentees from some of the challenged records. So there was a problem or an issue with a record, whether it was a person that was deceased that needed a correction because of mismatched data, or it was just somebody who already voted, point blank in another state. And now you show in certain counties, and this is also the second part of that phase. Now we'll see how many request ballots. There shouldn't be requesting ballots if they've already voted in another state. So did we just catch a double voter in advance? And the worst part about it legally is we told the Board of Elections that the potential for a legal double voter. So they didn't do anything about it. So then there's a whole other set of laws about malfeasance and other kinds of, misfeasance and different things that opens up legally. So when you don't do the right thing, you don't work with people, you try to, come to the outcomes, the perceived outcomes, and you try to sweep it under the rug, it doesn't go away. Especially when people have their rights and their ability to track that aspect, and they will. And, we'll see where it goes. I'm a little bit different in terms of my motivation. It's not about election outcome. For me, the system has to be honest. It has to be fair. And so we can get away from these narratives, because I've seen it both ways where both parties are complaining about an outcome or making suggestions that there was something wrong. And that's where we get stuck. We got to get away from that. And the systems have to do their part, but the election administrators have to follow through on conducting the basics. If they do that, then there'll be very little to argue over. It'll just be, hey, this one we didn't organize well enough. The other side did better. That's where we got to get to. Not this whole, I want to call into question this race or that race. That's where we're currently stuck. We're spinning on wheels because of the fact that we haven't addressed information systems in these other proceedings.
No, I got you. And we're not going to get to that point until we have people like Allison Nikolai and yourself and others who are keeping tabs, watching close. It's going to be interesting because I know there's going to be some of these people like yourselves and that who are going to be looking at this voter information and after the election saying this person shouldn't have been able to vote. This person, should not have been given a ballot. They've never had groups challenge them and look at that. I can guarantee you, Secretary of State of Ohio, whoever he ever was, because it goes back even before LaRose, has never had anybody challenge him like that. And like Allison is a hawk. This woman, she sees something, she goes right in, very sharp. So that's going to be interesting. And we'll keep at it. We'll just keep at it after the election. Make sure the election was accurate and everything. Brian, I'm going to give you let you almost have the last word here if you like.
Yeah, well, I'll just I think I'm going to take Matt up on his suggestion. I'll just hold on to my questions and see how the Lake County Board of Elections handles it, and I'll report in.
Excellent. Matt, do you have anything you want to just as a last word for Marcell?
Well, I would just maybe just one more question for Marcell, and this goes back, and I don't know if you Marcell heard the conversation between Brian and myself about, bank your vote versus in person. I think there are very smart folks who on both sides of this issue, and I'd be interested in hearing what Marcell had to say about it. And as you wrap up, maybe just let us know where we can find you. I think I noticed semi-recently you sort of got yourself on X, and that's great to see you sort of out in the social space, and you're sort of engaging with. I've just been looking at with some of our left-wing media, so to speak, and because I think because your name is on that lawsuit, their antennas are up. So maybe just talk about in person and your again, I don't think there's a real right or wrong answer to this, but let us know what you think about it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I did want to chime in on it. The thing is, it depends on your personal situation. If you're going to work at the polls, it becomes a foregone conclusion, like Brian was saying earlier, just go vote early, right? If you are going to take an absentee ballot, whatever, you're maybe disabled, confined, mobility challenged, you're going to be out of the country. There's a number of reasons for that. And while the law is the way it is, you can take advantage of that. But here's what I would say. If you had a choice, deliver your ballot in person. For chain of custody purposes, because if you've seen the Inspector General reports on the United States Postal Service and what their own IG, Inspector General, said about the way that they have handled recently election ballots, I don't think you would want to put anything in that system with regards to your vote. Okay, so you can, the best thing, what I would do, and I've said this to people who I know as far public officials who are propounding, oh, everybody go vote. You don't want to take an absentee ballot request, not do it, then say, oh, I'm going to go just vote in early in person. You will be hosed if you do that, because you will get to the polling location. The worker will look at the poll book and they will say, oh, looks like you already took out an absentee ballot, even if you didn't vote. Sorry, you're not going to be able to vote and cast a regular ballot in person. You're going to have to vote provisionally. So what I tell people is, in Ohio, if you're voting by absentee ballot, you have to commit to it. If you've already asked for one, vote. Because you don't want to go in person and be told you can't cast a regular ballot. They don't let you do the both in Ohio. It's an important distinction. So commit to doing it. And number two, as far as your delivery mechanism, bring it to the Board of Elections, if at all possible. If your circumstances allow you, bring it to them, or have a relative, in this case, a relative is still a law, right, to deliver it, if you have some type of disabled or confined status, so forth, and let them, transmit it and give you a receipt and all that stuff. If it's a last case resort, you got to put it in the U.S. Postal Service. Okay, everyone's got to roll the dice at some point, but that's how I would play this election until there's different changes in the laws, and there may be, who knows.
All right, Marcell. Well, thank you.
Where can we find
Matt?
you on Twitter and elsewhere?
Oh yeah, hang on.
Last name is Strbich.
Where can we find you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on X. I'm at Marcell, Marcell, Strbich, Strbich.
Very good. All right. Excellent, Marcell. Really appreciate you coming on tonight. Let's talk again. Let's keep it. And it is good to follow you on X and everything, because you get the latest what's happening with that voter integrity and everything. So, again, I appreciate you taking the time tonight. So thank you for all your efforts. Really appreciate it. And thank you again.
Thank you, Marcell.
Thanks a lot. Well, we're going to wrap it up. That's it for tonight. But make sure you follow us on Rumble, on YouTube, and on Facebook. And follow us, and you never know, because we go everywhere. And today we even we talked to Joe Biden. So have a good night. Hey, Joe. How you doing? Doesn't have much to say at the moment. Somebody said this was Joe Biden, so I wanted to come over here to find out. Is that right? No?